Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Cohen. I'm a research analyst at Ladenburg Thalmann. I want to thank everyone for attending the Sachs Associates 9th Annual Health Tech Investment Forum. I want to thank Leonard for the invitation to speak, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I will be attending virtually. So I'm pre-recording this. So welcome and thank you for joining us. We're here to talk about some, I guess, large ideas in MedTech going forward, what's going on, where we're headed, and what the future may bring. So I do have a number of disclosures. This is the first page of disclosure, any company mentioned, and this is the second page of disclosures, which shows virtually all of our current coverage list. Again, I'm Jeff Cohen. I'm at Ladenburg Thalmann. I'm a medical device analyst at the firm. It's a middle market investment bank, and we're primarily focused on medical technology. At least in with my team, we're currently covering about 33 companies in the public domain, with a few that are public and trading OUS. So this is our agenda for today. As I talked about our focus, we are primarily focused on micro cap, small cap, with a bit of mid cap. So our average market cap, just over $1 billion. I'd say our median's around 100. Mostly focused in the US as far as what we look at, with about a third of that focused in Europe and rest of the world. So I'd say about 20% of the companies that we look at and speak with and analyze are in the private domain as well. So this is a look at what we cover by segment. So you can see here, each category shows the companies under our coverage list that fall within it. Mainly what we call hardcore medtech, cardiovascular, ortho, spine, energy deliveries, robotics, with a bit of spec pharma, genomics, rehab. So, well, the market, as we know, took a bit of a dump back from early COVID in the March 2020. You can see that depicted here on the lows. We then spent a number of quarters, probably 8, 9, 10, clawing back, if you will, over this period, which occurred over the past 2 years. And then we kind of entered a new paradigm this year with inflationary pressures, recession, question mark, labor issues, supply chain issues, etc. So I'm going to move along. So some trends as far as deals and what's been going on, both in the US and in Europe, and both private and the public space. So on the private space, we can see here number of transactions. Obviously, the aggregate dollar amount is very difficult to locate. We're generally using S&P as our primary resource here. So you'll see in the private space, number of transactions decreased slightly during COVID year 2020, and then further decreased in 21, as you can see here. And year to date is, for lack of a better descriptive, I would say somewhat abysmal, relatively speaking. And these numbers are down 14, 31, and 47% respectively. Things look even worse in the public space, both US and Europe as well. So 19 was a very strong year. 20 was even stronger in the public space because most public companies had a bit of a wake-up call, if you will, and went out rather aggressively to shore up their balance sheet, or in some cases to raise money in the various ways: M&A, some M&A, pipes, placements, spin-offs, acquisitions, and that trend remained strong in 21 as well into the public markets. However, this year we are down 77% in the public market offering space, and that's holding true for US and for Europe. Year to date, obviously these numbers are all year to date, and we still have another 4 months to go. So fingers crossed. So transactional value depicts how this trend has gone, which follows a similar trend from the public market, down 77% year to date. Great. So there are 4 areas I really wanted to touch upon with a tremendous amount of innovation in areas that we care about dramatically. One is obviously robotics. There are now over 100 robotic companies in the space that we will run through a number. Keep in mind, total systems out there are less than 8,000, of which Intuitive Surgical owns 7,000 of them. Intuitive placed about 1,300 units last year. They're doing about $1 million per unit on their 7,000 systems, $7 billion of revenue. So some interesting companies here. I guess we're going top down. Venus Concept, hair transplantation, as well as an aesthetic robot coming later this year. Loom does eyelash extensions. As you know, Medtronic purchased Mazor a few years ago. And you also know that Siemens purchased Corindus, which is focused on PCI a few years ago. Intuitive is the big daddy. Couple worth mentioning, Titan working on a single port access. Mimic also working on a single port, primarily focused on the hysterectomy market. Stryker bought Mako a number of years ago. So these are just some worth noting. It's not worthy going through the 100, but still, even now, only approximately 2% of surgical interventions are being done robotically. There's about 40 or 45 million interventions, surgeries in the United States, of which robotics is only 2%. We expect that trend to continue to grow at a more rapid pace in the marketplace as more and more of these units and companies get approval and start placing more units out there in the commercial setting. Next, we're going to talk about energy technologies. We look at the whole spectrum of energies, and what they're doing, obviously TMS, top down. There's about 7 approved TMS companies. We do cover BrainsWay. There's a number of other ones going after a number of indications. Most all started out in depression and have expanded a bit now into OCD, with more coverage in OCD, as well as the addiction market in a number of areas. Tivic mainly working on sinuses. It's an OTC sale. Alpha Tau is working on energy delivery relative to oncology, with Alpha Darts being placed both internally and externally. Helios is a company focused on the tongue and stimulating the tongue with exercise for a number of indications in neuromuscular areas such as MS, Parkinson's, and stroke is where they're focused. Electrocore, cluster headache, migraine headache. It's a handheld stimulation device mainly used on the vagal nerve around the neck area. Orthofix has a number of technologies focused on healing, post-surgery, both unions and non-unions. Strataskin, 308 nanometer lasers for mostly for psoriasis as well as vitiligo. Viviv is a women's focused company on RF and is running a large stress urinary incontinence trial. So next, cardiology. A number of innovations in cardiology, although I would say on a big picture basis, cardiology has slowed a bit the past few years. I'd say that a lot of areas have slowed a bit the past few years, primarily due to COVID, hospital, access to hospitals, and surgeries out there. So, cardiology, probably up there with spine, was one of the first areas to slow down or to be halted only for essential procedures. So what's interesting in cardiology, Carmat, a total artificial heart. It's a French-based company that will be back to the market. They had a few quarter halt from production issues, and now they're back. They have implanted a couple score of units so far, and they'll be back to their trials and commercial setting in Germany, a couple other European countries, as well as France, and a first-in-human study in the United States. Artivion, which purchased Yotech a few years ago in Germany, is focused on the aortic arch through the thoracic region down to the AAA region. Heart flow is more of an imaging technology in cardiology. Bioventrix has a device which basically bypasses dead tissue in the heart. Invino Medical is an interesting company working on a veno valve for the legs. They are soon to be probably halfway enrolled on a trial later this year, which is 75 persons and should have a readout early 23. And I think everyone recognizes Abbott, which has also acquired a number of companies in cardiology the past couple of decades. So next we'll go to diagnostics and genomics. There's a lot of flux in this area in particular. So in the traditional lab space, a lot of companies levered up dramatically their revenues from COVID testing, and that's largely gone away. For the most part, as far as lab testing, I think more testing is getting into the community and point of care, and obviously the home as well. In the case of genomics, it's really a larger AI play. So few to mention here, Lumira we cover has about 25,000 devices in the marketplace and now has approvals outside of COVID in a few areas, and they should have a menu of over 10 tests during 2023, mostly in the EU, the testing, and secondarily the US and rest of the world as well. So BioNano is optical genome mapping. We cover LabCorp, which owns BioReference. OPCO, which owns BioReference. We cover Prenetics, which is a company focused on a number of spaces, including predictive information. Centogene's another company in the space that does a fair amount of testing. Invitae is more focused on genomics. Q, we probably heard about, heading to the home, and Nanox, which is doing both imaging as well as through their Zebra acquisition, a fair amount of data collection. The Nanox is the single source is approved. The ARC device, we hope, will be filed for and approved over the coming quarter. So again, labs benefited from COVID. However, they're being punished dramatically on the coming out of COVID because volumes and revenues are down dramatically. So, there's more of a push to obtain information in the marketplace and then what to do with it. So that's a big issue from a cloud standpoint that we're seeing now. Genomics and imaging now looking into analyzing, comparing, and contrasting data out there. And then finally interpreting data as far as what can be done and when we can do it. There's a lot of machine learning and AI going on from the cloud standpoint, or actually the fourth cloud, as many describe it, which is the manipulation of the data that sits on the cloud. So we wanted to talk about valuations a bit and cover that. When we look at a representative list of 55 nano, micro, and small cap companies, I think we cover about half of these. We are generally looking at EV over revenue multiples for a number of reasons. Obviously, most of these small companies are not making money. And B, therefore, there's no EBITDA, there's no earnings. And unlike other sectors or sectors within healthcare, we're not grabbing some monstrous revenue number out 5 to 10 years and then discounting it back, trying to show a free cash flow. So we are typically doing our valuations based on a 2025 revenue multiple. and then we discount it by 2 years currently at discount rates, which could be between, I think, about 8 and 15% for what we cover. So these multiples were, last 12 months, were 7.9 times. The median, obviously, much smaller. You've always got a handful of darlings that raise this number dramatically on the average. And now we are down fairly dramatically from those levels, I think down 40 and 30% respectively. So typically we're looking at smaller, earlier companies, hopefully and mostly doing revenues currently of, call it 10, 20, 30, 50 million of revenue. And these companies obviously are growing, maybe not during a COVID period, but they're currently growing generally speaking. And growth rates could be as low as single digits or as high as triple digits. So for us, it's about revenues and growth of those revenues with reasonable assumptions, projections, and modeling. I like to say we live on planet Earth when it comes to valuations. So, we don't necessarily buy into the $15 million market cap that somebody has a $1 billion 2031 revenue number, of which throws off $45 million of cash out there, 45% in cash in current terms. We steer clear of those DCF analysis. So our summary is a few takeaways. So capital raising, corporate expenditures have slowed dramatically. Folks want results, and companies have been forced to become much more prudent in their decision making and spending. And that's coming from internal at companies, it's coming from their boards as well, and it's coming from the public. So therefore, capital raising is slowed, as we all know. It's stable now and would always like to pick up. So if the environment is permissive, we do expect capital raising to return back to more normalized levels that we've seen over the past 5 years. Definitely the price of the securities in public land has dramatically decreased and has dramatically hampered the ability of small companies to raise capital or to use their securities. And company innovation continues, knock on wood, and we hope it continues to continue going forward. We do anticipate a number of trials and a number of companies to either get into latter stage trials, filings at the FDA and agencies for clearances and approvals, both EU focused and US focused. And as far as innovation on the robotic side, a whole lot more coming with proof of concepts and first in human trials. There are now probably 10 to 15 robotic companies that are commercial in one way, shape, or form. And external delivery, a big theme around here. We are strong believers in energy over pharmaceuticals. We're seeing more of these technologies come forward and more of them competing head to head with pharmaceuticals. A few things to note in particular, like TMS is now requiring less failures on pharmaceuticals in order to go to TMS therapy in the United States. So they've kind of continued to crawl upstream, as we would call it. Pace of development has definitely slowed the past few years. A lot of that's come from hospital access, as well as funding, staffing, etc. So that should continue to get stronger going forward. And in genomics and diagnostics, particularly on the diagnostic space, we're expecting more testing coming, more local. to communities and point of care and the home, as opposed to laboratory testing. And we're seeing a plethora more tests come to market. I think in the United States, it's more of an issue of clearances and money flow as far as reimbursement goes. So that's a wrap. This is our QR code. If you want to catch an image of that, it's been a pleasure, and feel free to reach out to us. And again, Sachs, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.